Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Let me start with a link to the article I wrote last week, which was Debt, Virus and Locusts Create a Perfect Storm for Africa. There's been a strong relief rally in Asia today. Europe looks to follow suit. Treasuries, yen seeing some real downward pressure. This was an image from David Inglis at Bloomberg in Asia. I like this from the Central Bank of Jamaica. Everyone should just chill out. And maybe that was the signal. As I wrote, quoting Richmond Federal Reserve Bank President Tom Barkin, but to my mind, central banks can't come up with vaccines, he said. And as I said then, what is becoming increasingly clear is that world economists and policymakers are very linear in their thinking and are flummoxed by the exponential multiplicative nature of the coronavirus. I was saying a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy, in my opinion, and I'll show you why later. Home thoughts. This is amazing. The famous inscription, if there is a paradise on earth, in Diwan, a Khas Red Fort via I am Rana, and struck me because there certainly is a fin de siècle, an apocalyptic mood afoot. Revelation 6, 12, 13, when he opened the sixth seal, I looked and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit. And the reason that came to mind was because I'd watched this weekend for the first time, actually, Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, which is a remarkable piece of cinema, I must say. And then I learnt the main actor in that, Max von Sydow, has passed away. Amelia 10412, we are not saints, but we have kept our appointment. How many people can boast as much? Quote from Samuel Beckett. The Seventh Seal was directed by Ingmar Bergman with Bengt Ekeroth and Max von Sydow. It certainly feels like that photograph. That is a decade of semiotic arousal when everything, it seemed, was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. And the passing away of Max von Sydow certainly feels like a harbinger. The zeitgeist of a time is its defining spirit or its mood. Capturing the zeitgeist of the now is not an easy thing because we're living in a dizzyingly fluid moment. Paul Virilio cracks a joke, the end of the world is a concept without a future. This is an eerie moon over Beijing. That photograph is from Stephen McDonnell. William Dalrymple has a photographic short show, The Historian's Eye, just opened, and this is Hamilton House, Ballard Estate, Mumbai. Sundowner somewhere in the Masai Mara via Jambo magazine, and a wow moment on safari captured by Jerry van der Walt, and it is indeed a wow moment. Political Reflections Russian TV runs footage showing how Putin made Turkey's President Erdogan wait in frustration in the Kremlin before greeting him while the cameras were rolling. And I think Erdogan finds himself in a Putin rat trap. WHO apparently declared that the COVID-19 was a pandemic. This was a tweet I saw from Xinhua News, but apparently not, I subsequently discovered. Now, interesting developments in China. Xi Jinping's visit to Wuhan sends a clear message. China has beat the coronavirus. And this is a real powerful statement that he's sent. I still have a lot of questions about the numbers that came out of Wuhan, but it's interesting, and certainly the newly installed Commander-in-Chief is going to proclaim victory on the evening news. However, look at this message from someone inside the red zone in Italy. It seems impossible that China has only had 3,000 deaths with its size of population. He says that they, in their small region, have the same number of deaths daily as China was reporting. So this is the point. Some of the statistics that China has reported seem considerably lower than we might have thought, or at least I thought. China CCP Deputy Secretary General of the State Council, Ding Xingyang, admits in a press conference in and before January 2020 there were more than 3,000 medical staff infected by the Wuhan coronavirus. That means everything the CCP said in January were lies. Then I saw another response. A lot of what happens in Wuhan did not see daylight. People in the world would not know about the power of the virus until it hits a country with a free press. But by then, it would be too late to contain the virus. That takes me back to Groucho Marx. Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? As I said, notwithstanding WHO's pussyfooting around calling it a pandemic, it's absolutely clear to me, as it was on the 24th of February, that we're dealing with a virus that has turned exponential and non-linear and is a pandemic. Italy's massive coronavirus quarantine provokes panic and prison riots. Stocks fell 11%. The Italian army has deployed tanks in the city of Foggia as around 50 prisoners escaped from local jail. Zorina Q, who I've recently discovered on social media, is providing very good visuals. He predicts that the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic is coming. Daily update: 876 coronavirus deaths have been reported in total outside mainland China. That's Zorina Q again. The death toll follows a perfect exponential growth, growing tenfold every 10 days. He expects the trend to continue for at least the next 10 days, which means 8,000 deaths around March 18 to March 20. Coronavirus has spread more rapidly in many European countries than at the China peak. Comparisons in absolute numbers conceals the situation because China's population is so large, says John Ross, 43. In proportion to the population chart shows in European countries, spread now much more rapid than China peak. As COVID-19 cases increase rapidly, the next 7 days are going to be crucial for Europe. If this chart holds, that's Remy GMI. Nassim Taleb, in an interview with Yania Bariam, why it's better to panic early very interesting points he makes in that 9-minute video. Here you see President Trump shaking hands with people after arriving in Orlando, Florida. He said, Remy GMI again, this is only the beginning for the US, except with a population of 327 million, the curves should be much steeper. We'll know in 7 days as long as enough people are being tested. And that took me back to Berber, the flu idiocy that Epsilon theory coined. Trump, nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. At this moment, there are 546 confirmed cases of coronavirus with 22 deaths. Think about that. So last year, 37,000 Americans died from the common flu. It averages between 27,000 and 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. At this moment, there are 546 confirmed cases of coronavirus with 22 deaths. Think about that, Trump tweeted. Molly Yong Fast, so Trump's Twitter feed is just a boy whistling in the dark to keep himself from being afraid. Edward G. Luce says Trump's unvarying instinct is to label bad news as fake news and find a scapegoat to pin it on. If he continues to do this with the coronavirus, his words will kill people, including his own voters who are disproportionately older. I said it will be a virucide. He is already behind the curve, and the curve is parabolic, exponential, and non-linear. Trump again, there are no mixed messages, only political weaponization by people like you and your brother Fredo. That took me back to Ozymandias, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And this was written about China, but it could apply to Trump. What is thriving, however, is all that ridiculous red culture and the nauseating adulation that the system heaps on itself via shameless pro-party hacks who chirrup hosannas at every turn. It's frightening for its narcissism, its incompetence, and its Shakespeare-level hubris. The president's remarks at the CDC were a repudiation of good science and good crisis management from inside one of the world's most respected scientific institutions. You passed $100 bills to rich people when the economy was great, and pennies to poor people when the markets were tanking. The economy was slowing down and people were dying. It's going to be a pretty potent attack line for Democrats this year, Annie Lowry. And I went and looked at Predict It, and I think essentially Trump is a sell. I wrote about the origins of the coronavirus, and I quoted Don DeLillo, there's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It is the sum total of the things they aren't telling us. And to quote Scott Burke, what are the odds that a SARS-like coronavirus with overlapping genetics from HIV mutated and crossed over into humans next door to a laboratory which had been enhancing coronavirus with HIV for over a decade? And conversely, what are the odds It leaked out of the laboratory. As I wrote on the 16th of Feb, viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics, and Nate Silver 538 tweeted, "Media innumeracy and coronavirus is not a good mix." And it's interesting how many people push back, particularly when I was posting some very exponential numbers, and said, no, it's not possible, and really never interrogating the analysis on the mathematics, just on the gut reaction. Let's move on to currency markets. Euro dollar 113.92, dollar index 95.738, Japanese yen all over the place, but now at 103.88. Swiss franc 0.9330, the pound 130.66, the Australian dollar 0.6564, India rupee 74.05, South Korean won 11.9424, Brazilian real fresh record low 472.43, Egyptian pound 15.70, and the South African rand 15.933. Dollar index 95.738, euro dollar 113.96. This is an interesting series of 3 charts of credit spreads via Bianco Research. You can see how the oil and gas sector has blown out, as has the high yield and even high grade. I remain of the view that a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy. Look at this performance since the start of the coronavirus outbreak. S&P 500 down 17%, hotels and restaurants down 27%, airlines down 34%, resorts and cruises minus 43%. Carl remarks, "So it turns out that the real version of Mad Max would be gangs of people going around trying to sell you crude oil at $10 a barrel." Rather neat. I've written about Putin before. He really is a geopolitical grandmaster. And I'll explain to you what I think is going on. Bloomberg, this is developing into a game of who'll blink first between 2 contestants who've cut off their eyelids. Saudi Arabia's new oil strategy, a short, sharp shock to cow Russia, looks very much like its Yemen military strategy, a short, sharp shock meant to cow the Houthi rebels. The chances of it being any more successful are slim. Saudi Arabia has launched an oil price war, slashing the official cost of its crude by the most in 30 years, and planning to raise output by at least 1 million barrels a day in the coming months. Reserved its biggest price cuts for sales to Northwest Europe, a key market for Russian barrels. That challenge won't win it any friends among policymakers in Moscow. This is developing into a game of who'll blink first between 2 contestants who've cut off their eyelids. The risk, though, is that just like the Houthis in Yemen, Russia and other big oil producers absorb the pain and cling on, dragging the kingdom into a long oil price war that neither can afford. But the kingdom clearly feels it needs to show its force to be reckoned with, no matter the cost. November 2017, I was writing about how the then 30-year-old Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, arrived on the scene and immediately launched an unwinnable war in the Yemen. Now, this might be one of the most stunning charts of all. Bonds for the oil company Occidental, which were trading above par just in mid-February, now completely obliterated. That's the stalwart. And Javier Blas then said the US shale sector is getting completely killed, a complete bloodbath, billions of dollars in equity wiped out. Occidental Petroleum is down 44%, EOG down 35%, Continental Resources down 40%, smaller players like Parsley down more than 50%. And I responded to Javier saying, so maybe it was in fact a Putin MBS two-step, Javier, and we're focusing on a pretend fight where the real target was. And then I saw a tweet from J. Kyle Bass, the Saudis and Russians have flown a metaphorical jet into the heart of the US energy business. And I think it was they who were the real target. Gold is at 1663. Dubai DFM index down 8.29%, back at 2013 levels. That's from Sun Chartist. February 2014, I was writing about Dubai being the real transit state, a connection point in an interconnected century. And that's why, at a time when hyper-connectedness is not the flavor of the month, Dubai is finding itself in the crossfire. Brazilian stock market down 12%, on course for the biggest fall since October 1998, Russia, LTCM, looming real crisis and all that. President Bolsonaro said a while ago, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok survived an assassination attempt in Khartoum, State TV and AP reported. Abdullah Hamdok's family confirmed he was safe following the explosion, which targeted his convoy. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. He was appointed Prime Minister last August after pro-democracy protests forced the military to remove the autocratic President Bashir and replace him with a civilian-led government. Military generals remain the de facto rulers of the country and have shown little willingness to hand over power to the civilian-led administration. As I wrote on the 10th of June last year, the zeitgeist of the revolution in Khartoum was intoxicating. As I watched events unfold, it felt like Sudan was a portal into a whole new normal. A US Marine back from Ethiopia tests positive for COVID-19 at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, Talk Media News. The Marine stationed at Fort Belvoir tested positive Saturday after returning from overseas on official business. According to a Department of Defense statement, he had been in Ethiopia. There are no reported cases of COVID-19, the official name for coronavirus, in Ethiopia, according to the World Health Organization. Ethiopia is home to one of Africa's busiest international airline hubs and has stepped up its preparedness to contain a potential outbreak of COVID-19, according to news reports. Africa's second most populous nation, with an estimated population of 107 million, it has 4 international airports and 21 land border crossing points. According to the information I have received, they've tested 31 people, and therefore if South Korea had tested the same number of people, they too would be reporting no cases. Nigeria confirmed a second case of the coronavirus. Officials from the health ministry say the patient, a Nigerian, had contact with the Italian, Nigeria's patient 0. A suspected coronavirus patient has escaped from Wilkins Hospital in Zimbabwe before being tested. Authorities are looking for that Thai national. As I said on the 24th of February, we're past the point of no return. I had then extreme concerns about coronavirus making landfall, And I was quoting epsilon theories, nothing, 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 cluster, 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 which seems to be the phase we're now in, and then boom. On the 27th of January, I was saying I have to assume that the coronavirus is already in Africa, but just not diagnosed. That's erasing certainty. Returning to the article I wrote last week about debt, virus, and locusts creating a perfect storm for Africa, I said one issue is about, the actual infection. But I said the second issue is about the blowback from the China coronavirus feedback loop phenomenon. I said the virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved and therefore is a black swan. Fantasy predictions of a V-shaped recovery in China have been dashed. In fact, China cannot just crank up the factory because that will risk a second round effect of infections. I was saying you don't have to be a rocket scientist or an economist to calculate which countries are directly in the line of fire. Angola, Congo, Brazzaville, DRC, Equatorial Guinea, Zambia, Nigeria, and South Africa spring immediately to mind. And then I was talking about the big three, which is South Africa, Nigeria, and Angola, all of whom I think are going to be in deep recession full year 2020. Nigeria's oil revenues cratering, and there is $16 billion of hot money parked in short-term certificates, which is all headed for the exit as we speak. A currency devaluation is now predicted and predictable. And I also said in a podcast with Nicholas Norbrook, the Naira is gone. It's just a question of when. And Bloomberg yesterday, oil dive may force Nigeria to devalue Naira as reserves dwindle. The plunge in oil prices may force Nigeria to devalue the Naira as dwindling export revenues deplete FX reserves, curbing the central bank's ability to support the currency, Societe Generale warned. Central bank reserves have decreased by 20% in the past 2 months, to the lowest since November 2017, and may soon reach the 30 billion threshold set by Governor Emefiele for the country to consider a devaluation. The central bank may start adjusting currency policy before it reaches that point. Naira fundamentals are on an unsuitable trajectory, and under current external conditions, especially lower oil prices, the risk of a devaluation is very elevated, SocGen strategists wrote. Combination of a current account deficit, previously due to strong imports, but now being compounded by weak exports, portfolio outflows, and lower oil prices, will continue to deplete FX reserves and pressure the Naira. Yields on Nigeria's 2049 Eurobonds climbed 143 basis points to 10.18%, the highest on record. The budget was based on a crude price projection of $57 a barrel. Brent crude prices have plummeted about 45% this year. An initial attempt at a managed depreciation is more likely than a large one-off devaluation like in the past, but it might be challenging to maintain over the medium term unless bolder policy action is taken. The central bank could also consider tightening liquidity in the interbank market or by tightening policy, while a planned Eurobond sale could help rebuild currency reserves. South African All Shares minus 14.48% this year, dollar rand 15.94, Egyptian pound 15.70, EGX 30 minus 21.33% year to date, Nigerian All Share minus 4.44% year to date, Ghana Stock Exchange minus 3.08% year to date. Murchison Falls in Uganda are the most powerful waterfall in the world. Here, River Nile passes through a 7-meter narrow space, creating a mighty thunderous roar. Video Rama Atala via Philip Wamala. Nairobi All Shares down 11.08% year to date. NSE20 is down 12% year to date. The market suffered yesterday on the feedback loop phenomenon. Thank you for listening.